Forget everything you think you know about the Spartans. Forget the oiled-up warriors in leather speedos, the slow-motion battles, and the one-liners. The truth is far more complex and, frankly, far more fascinating than any movie. For centuries, we've been captivated by the myth of Sparta, a city-state of ultimate warriors. But who were the people behind the legend? What was it truly like to live in ancient Sparta? Today, we're peeling back the layers of myth to reveal the real Spartans. This isn't just a story about battles. It's a story about a unique and extreme society, a grand social experiment that produced the most feared soldiers of the ancient world, but ultimately led to its own downfall. So grab your shields because we're marching back in time. To understand Sparta, you have to understand its geography. Tucked away in a valley in the southern Peloponnese of Greece, a region called Laconia, Sparta was naturally fortified by mountain ranges. This isolation shaped their entire worldview. They didn't need massive walls like Athens. The mountains were their walls. This sense of security allowed them to focus inward, perfecting their society and their military. But it also made them deeply suspicious of outsiders and new ideas. Their world was Laconia, and their primary concern wasn't conquering distant lands, but controlling their own backyard. This control was centered on one crucial and brutal fact: the subjugation of the Helots. The Helots were the foundation upon which Sparta was built, and they were also its greatest fear. They weren't slaves in the traditional sense. They were a conquered people, the original inhabitants of the lands around Sparta, bound to the soil they worked. They outnumbered the Spartan citizens by at least 7-1. They farmed the land, providing the food and resources that freed up every single Spartan male to do one thing and one thing only: train for war. This created a permanent state of tension. The Spartans lived in constant fear of a Helot uprising. Every aspect of their society, their brutal training, their secretive police force called the Cryptia, who would terrorize and even murder Helots, was designed to keep this massive, oppressed population in check. So, when you picture a Spartan warrior, remember he wasn't just training to fight foreign armies. He was training to be a prison guard in his own home. The life of a Spartan citizen began with a test. Legend says newborn babies were inspected by elders, and any deemed weak or imperfect were left on a mountainside to die. While historians now debate how common this practice actually was, it perfectly illustrates the Spartan obsession with physical perfection and strength. From the moment they were born, they belonged to the state. At age 7, a boy was taken from his family and entered the agoge. This wasn't just a school, it was a brutal, all-encompassing training system designed to strip away individuality and forge the ultimate soldier. They were kept underfed to encourage them to steal food, a lesson in stealth and resourcefulness. If they were caught, they weren't punished for stealing but for being caught. They were taught to endure pain, to speak only when necessary, hence our word laconic, and to place the group above themselves. The agoge was a crucible, burning away weakness and forging a bond of brotherhood that would be unbreakable on the battlefield. Spartan women are often overlooked, but they were unlike any other women in the ancient Greek world. While Athenian women were confined to the home, Spartan women were educated, they owned land, and they were famously outspoken. Why? Because with the men constantly away training or at war, the women ran the estates and managed the households. Their primary role was to bear strong children for the state, and to support this, they undertook physical training themselves. They participated in sports, often in public, which scandalized other Greeks. A famous saying captures their spirit. When an Athenian woman asked a Spartan woman why they were the only women who could rule men, she replied, "Because we are the only women who give birth to men." They were the backbone of the Spartan system, instilling the warrior ethos in their sons and maintaining the home front with an iron will. The Spartan war machine was the envy of the Greek world. Their main strength was the phalanx, a dense formation of hoplites, heavily armed foot soldiers. Each Spartan carried a large round shield, the aspis, a long spear, and a short sword. In the phalanx, they were a wall of bronze and wood. The shields overlapped, protecting the man to the left. This formation required immense discipline, trust, and teamwork, all qualities drilled into them since the age of 7. To break a Spartan phalanx was considered nearly impossible. Their iconic red cloaks weren't just for show. They were said to hide wounds and intimidate the enemy. Their reputation alone could win battles. Often, enemy armies would simply break and run at the mere sight of the Spartans marching towards them in silent, perfect formation. So, if they were so unbeatable, what happened to Sparta? Their greatest strength was also their greatest weakness, their rigid system. They were resistant to change. While other city-states embraced coinage, trade, and new military tactics, Sparta remained stubbornly stuck in the past. Their population was also a huge problem. Constant warfare, the practice of discarding infants, and a system that made it hard to achieve full citizenship meant their numbers dwindled relentlessly. At the legendary Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BC, King Leonidas led 300 Spartans. A century and a half later, at the Battle of Leuctra, they could barely muster a few hundred citizens to fight. They were defeated there by the Thebans, who used innovative tactics that shattered the once invincible Spartan phalanx. This defeat broke their spirit and their power over Greece forever. Their refusal to adapt made them a relic in a changing world. The image of the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae is etched into our collective memory. It's the ultimate story of courage against impossible odds. And while it's a powerful tale, it's important to remember the context. Leonidas and his 300 weren't alone. They were joined by thousands of other Greeks. Their sacrifice was a strategic one, a holding action designed to delay the massive Persian army and allow the rest of Greece to prepare its defenses. The battle became a cornerstone of Spartan propaganda, cementing their image as the selfless defenders of Greece. But it also highlights their fatal flaw, a focus on glorious death rather than long-term survival. The myth of Thermopylae inspired generations, but it also masked the societal rot that was already setting in. They were masters of the battlefield, but they couldn't win the war against time and their own rigid culture. So, the real Spartans were not movie superheroes. They were a complex, contradictory people living in an extreme society. They were a military elite built on the backs of a terrorized population. Their women were uniquely empowered, yet their society was brutally patriarchal. They valued courage and sacrifice, but their system was so rigid it ultimately collapsed under its own weight. The story of Sparta is a powerful cautionary tale. It shows us how a society that prioritizes military might above all else, above innovation, diplomacy, and individual freedom, is destined to fade. The legend of the invincible warrior lives on, but the real city of Sparta slowly crumbled, becoming a ghost haunted by the memory of its own glory. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey back to ancient Greece. The story of Sparta is a reminder that history is rarely as simple as the myths we tell. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the past, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to our channel for more stories that challenge what you think you know about history. Let us know in the comments which historical topic you'd like us to tackle next. Thanks for watching.